Back to Data Loo. In today's video, I'm going to go over Netflix titles data sets. And in the previous video, we have also covered this data set, but covering like different topics. So if you want to check it out, I'm going to have the link on the upper right corner. And I'm going to use Python and Excel for a demonstration to specifically teach you how to structure or manipulate your datetime column when it's a string in your data set. So here is the Netflix titles data set. We have show ID, which is going to be unique for each show, and I'm gonna tell you what the type of a show it is. It's either a movie or TV show, and what the title is, director, cast, country, date added, which is actually the actual date, and then we have release year, rating, duration, listed in, which is actually gonna be more like genre of the TV show or movie, and then we have description. But in this video, I'm going to focus on the date added and release year. So first thing we need to do is to make sure that we look at date added column, because that's going to be the column we're going to be manipulating. And then here you can see that it has August 14, 2020, and the month is actually spelled out into letters, so clearly it's a string. And then so what do we do if we want to extract a year out of this string, or extract a month or day out of the string? Like, how do we do that? But first, we need to make sure that the blanks are actually taken care of, because when the column has blank, then whatever you manipulate, those blank rows wouldn't be available to be manipulated. So we can do that by checking the blanks to see how many there are. So we can see that there are actually 10 of them, and we will have to filter these out because it's not gonna be available for us to actually manipulate this column if these exist. So that's gonna be the first step we're gonna do. First thing we're gonna do is filter out date added is null, and what we're gonna do here is df here stands for data frame, which is a data set I just showed you guys, and we're gonna overwrite the data frame itself. So instead of calling it as a different name of a data set, we're gonna just override it itself. That's why we're doing df equals, and then the manipulation. So in the filters, you have to call df bracket twice, because one is pointing to the column and one is actually filtering it. And then so what we do here is that we're gonna point to the date added column and then dot, not NA parentheses, meaning that we're gonna filter out all the rows that are not blanks, and then we're gonna call it back to data frame. Here we're gonna use the date added column, but instead of converting it into a date, like what I'm gonna cover in a later video, what we're gonna just do is to get this year directly from this string. So what we're doing here is adding an additional column called year added. So we're gonna do df bracket quotation mark year added. This is adding a new column, equals df bracket the date added column that we're gonna pointing to, and I'm gonna manipulate it by using dot apply lambda x. So what this is doing is looping through every single row, and then for every row every x will be this string, and then we're gonna split it. We're gonna split it by the empty space. And what that's doing is actually breaking this down into a list of three parts of August by itself, and then 14 by itself, and 2020 by itself, because there's space in between them. And then we're gonna call the position of -1. So what a -1 position in list will mean is that you'll always just take the last part of this list, or last position of this list. So it doesn't matter if like how long the string is. It can be like instead of like August 14, 2020, it can be like additional, maybe like 5 different parts, but I will always only take the last character, or last 2020 out of it. Before I jump into how do I convert the string into an actual datetime column, please make sure to subscribe to learn more about data. And if you like this video, please make sure you share and like this video. And then let me in the comments, let me know what kind of data you like to work with, and I'll make sure I cover those data sets in the future. So instead of manipulating the date column as a string, which is very complicated as you can tell, we're going to convert the string into a date. So here we're going to import a pandas package first. It's a very commonly used data science package, so make sure you learn about it. So here we're going to do, what we're doing here is overriding the date added column itself, so we're not creating an additional column, and that's why we have to call the exact same name as the column name itself right now. And so we're gonna call df bracket date added equals PD is our pandas package dot to date time. So what is this function is going to be doing is pretty much looking at the column that we put in, and it's trying to map like what kind of date column it is, like because it can have so many different formats. But what it will be doing is just pretty much straight up convert it to a date time. Very straightforward. And then here, and then in the parentheses, we'll have to put in the df bracket date added, which is our column that we want to change it to date time instead of using it as a string. After we already convert it into, date time, it's going to be showing this date format instead of August 14, 2020 as a string, which is perfect. And then what we're going to do here is actually, if we, for example, if you want to aggregate this data into a year format, but it's not based on release year, because you don't know, like it can be that release year and date added are actually not the same year, and then we're gonna look at that later with a scatter plot. But in this case, we're gonna first look at, extract the year out of this date added column first, and then what we're gonna be doing is adding an additional column called df bracket year. So this is gonna be the additional year that we're gonna be looking at, equals pd dot. So pd is our pandas package, and then we have datetime index. So what it's doing is indexing this date format and then indexing based on year or a month or day, which is very useful. So you can just extract the specific whatever you need, if it's month or year or both. And then you have df bracket date added. So you're gonna we have to, in the parentheses, we'll have to put in what the date column we're gonna actually be using, and then dot year, since we're gonna extract the year out of it. And then, so if you only did that year, it's gonna give you some sort of like, I guess it's not an integer. It's gonna be giving you like decimal places, like a float, which is really weird because the year would not have decimal places. So what we need to do here is add dot as type. So as type is like converting whatever you have in the column into whatever format you want to be. So here I'm gonna put it as integer, and then I'm gonna do df.head, which will show you the first 5 rows of the data sets. And then we want to do df.head to make sure that we have your column added, and then making sure that the data looks correct to you. After we already extracted the year from date added, I think it'll be very interesting to see if Netflix always add the TV show or movie based on the release year, if they're actually always releasing it at the same time as a release year of the show. And so in this case, since we already have release year as a column that came with the data set, and then we extracted the year from date added. So now we can use some sort of scatter plot to see if it's always the same, that release year and the date added year are always the same. And so in this case, I'm gonna use a Seaborn package, which is a very commonly used plotting package that you can use. And I'm gonna call it as SN, and then I'm gonna do a scatter plot. So I'm gonna do SN dot scatter plot, parentheses x, which is the x-axis, gonna be release year, and then y-axis is gonna be year added that we added, and comma data equals df, which is our data frame, which is our data sets, just to remind you again. And then here we can clearly see that year added and release year are actually not always the same. Like you can have year added in 2020 with the TV shows that are released, or movies are released in 1960s or 1980s. So definitely that was not true, the assumption that year added and release year are actually the same year. But I think for the newer TV shows, it's probably true that they're the same. But just to keep that in mind that they're not the same.